but that we're allowing for uses that we want to see in those areas. So that's my high level zoning thought for what it's worth.
So if you look, I can't control the cursor on this, so John would have to point to it. There's kind of this ghost of a line that's going up to a cluster of 3 or 4 buildings. If you're across from the Econo Lodge, you can kind of see this. It's kind of a ghost of a road that you can see in there. There it is. So that would be the road. So it's going to come up. It's going to go past these structures. I don't know if they're staying or going, and then it starts to follow some. It goes up and it hits a switchback and then starts to follow up some of these gradients until it gets to the top of the hill. And then at the top of the hill is where they would lay out a set of streets to accommodate the development. I believe, I'm not going to put words in Watson, his project, but he understands their paths and their stuff, and he's part of how his funding is supposed to work is that he's going to be working on conserving pieces, working with folks to put in trails and work. So he's trying to cobble together money from a number of sources because there's a large parcel. This is part of the town that doesn't have very many parks. Are there opportunities that we can, this isn't just about, Habitat is more than just about, making money for Habitat for Humanity. They're good stewards, good neighbors, and so they're looking to put together a good project. So they're going to be getting funding. So this will be a project, as I said, that'll need a lot, but one thing that it needs is to be able to get in the door. And right now, as zoned rural, it isn't feasible.
The prospect of parks over there is really appealing. I mean, we talked about that when we were discussing the parks chapter of the city plan, where we want to do studies to find out where park needs are, but I think we're all aware that this area is definitely one that's very lacking.
Well, I'll just say again, simply, I support this change. I'm really excited about. I don't know whether Habitat can pull together enough funding, but I think it would be great to take a shot. And it's just going to be on the flat portion of the development, as I understand. But to add housing units seems really exciting to me.
How many units again, Mike, is potentially realistically?
They were talking around 50, but they've applied for a community development planning grant, which will give them the ability to start to study things out and determine all of the details. They might find out that this project is only feasible with 80 units, and then they'll have to decide if they can do 80 units. That's what the planning grants do, is you start to put ideas down and start to follow the money and see, how much, per unit cost. This is an expensive way to do it. You want to do affordable housing and build roads and sewers. That's a pretty expensive way to do it. But it's also one, if you can get the sewer and water in there, it could give you a lot of opportunities once you're up to the top of the hill.
Yeah, and yeah, conversations about Sabins that's 40 units, right?
No, that's a potentially they're talking 74 units.
Oh, 74. Okay.
Last I heard. So we'll see when something comes out there.
This might be just, a little smaller than, okay. And so we're talking about changing it from rural to
Res 9. And that would also include those 2 parcels that you see right there. at the bottom. So,
Yeah.
so actually one of those, so actually if you were still looking at the other map, what you would see is there's a little bit of a jog where these cluster of 5 buildings are. Those are already zoned Res 9. And then as you if you pan to the north a little bit more, John, if you can, you'll see that one parcel is a separate parcel, and then it comes back, connecting back in. So that parcel would go to Res 9. Yeah, so you can see it's a little bit different, but basically what we're doing is we're taking this corner and making the entire parcel plus this little one all to be Res 9. What they're currently zoned, those 2 little slivers there are currently zoned mixed use residential, which is a commercial zoning district. That is a single family home. So we, and we looked down here at these other ones, and I believe these 2 are multifamily, and we decided, we evaluated whether or not we should move them into the Res 9 and decided that it would not be appropriate based on their current use and their current layout. They're probably, because they're already multifamily, makes sense to keep them in their mixed use residential designation. So again,
Okay.
I would be sending out notices to everybody who's got, is an abutter to this property, as well as to the properties that are changing in the hearing notice. And that'll be a lot of notices.
A question of how you choose Res 9. Why not make that Res 3 and pack in a lot of housing if you want new houses? Like how do you guys decide Res 9, Res 6, Res 3 on this one?
So Res 9 is, the 9,000 is the number of square feet. So that's 1 unit per 9,000 square feet. So that's about quarter acre zoning. So 4 units per acre. They'll probably end up doing a PUD, which we'll talk about later. So on a 60 acre parcel, 60 times 4, 240 units, they have no need to go to putting what would be an awful lot more units. I won't even try to do the math in my head to go to Res 3.
That's a good question though. Wait, that 240 that you just stated, is that Res 9?
Into the downtown, but we don't want to squeeze housing into the place maybe that's more open.
Well, no, I think we are interested in squeezing in housing, but Mike, did you say 240?
I believe if it's
Res
60 acres, I want to guess it's about 60 acres. So if it's 4 units per acre, 4 times 60 is going to be 240 possible units up in there.
Okay, so John highlighted
there's a lot of unbuildable, nasty land up in there. There's
yeah,
it's going to be
so, okay. So Res 9, realistically, Res 9 is
matches it like Colonial. If you were to look just to the north of this, there's Colonial Drive, Freedom Drive, all of those, Freedom Way. Those are all classic quarter acre zoning. So if you're thinking about, these areas to the south, excuse me, they're very classic. Those loop-de-loop roads, those are all, classic Res 9, quarter acre zoning. Couple of bigger parcels in there, but for the most part, that's what you're thinking of. They're not going to be doing them this broken up because there's not a lot of developable land, which is why they will be doing a PUD when they're up in there. And we will talk about the PUDs about 2 or 3 numbers down from here, and we'll get to that.
I do want to revisit a point Eve was just making, which is that one thing that we think about a lot in these meetings is walkability and not relying on cars and hoping that our development can match transportation in a way in which our community can be not car centric. So this, like neighborhoods like this, it's kind of like not as conducive to walkable to downtown where a person can live without a car. So and that's why if this neighborhood or this area would be less attractive for more condensed development, it would be considerations like that. But what it sounds like is if we make this change, then potentially a PUD can be put in here and it can be developed pretty much to the full extent that it could be with Res 9. So You know,
And if they needed more density, they would just have to come back and ask for another rezoning, and you guys would have to consider whether or not it's appropriate. Right now, this is what they've asked for.
Yeah, it sounds like some of us would be up for, and you know, a res 6 or something, but just sounds like it's not needed though. Okay, does anybody else have anything else on this item, or should we move on? Okay, let me grab the screen back from you, John.
All right, so hopefully the next one is relatively quick. This goes back to our Res 9. We were just showing a few of the Res 9 neighborhoods. There was a proposal to reduce the side and front setbacks in Res 9. The front setback is 20 feet, side is 15 currently. And I conducted a review of all of the existing Res 9 neighborhoods and found that for the most part, they are in compliance with these setbacks. In a few areas, some of the setbacks would make structures non-conforming. For example, actually on the previous picture, if you had it still there, a little bit of the Derby Drive area is Res 9, and those structures had a few non-conformings. If you wanted an example of one place that did have a few. So I think the front setback is fine, considering there is a provision in section 3002 G4, which allows the administrative officer the right to reduce front setbacks to match the two closest structures. So if you have a neighborhood like Derby Drive, it doesn't meet that 20-foot front setback, it's still okay because the zoning administrator can match it to your neighbors. So if they're at 16 feet, then you can be at 16 feet. So I don't think there was a need to change that one. But I think there could be room to reduce the side setback to 10 feet. This would eliminate some nonconformities. I didn't have a big push on this one. This was a request that, there are a couple of people who came in, and we kind of had a little bit of a trend where we found I had a couple people that came in from these neighborhoods, and I said I would look at it. So I wouldn't change the front, but I would maybe consider moving the side setback to 10 feet.
What's a good reason for keeping the front setback?
What's that?
What's a good reason for keeping the front setback?
At 20 feet, well, most of the others, if you were to look at, Colonial Drive, as I just mentioned, those are all at 20, 25-foot setbacks. If we're trying to kind of match our character, the character of the neighborhood, our zoning regulations and rules match what's on the ground, that's what's on the ground. Otherwise you'll have ones in different, like I said, it's just consistency and character. I know you probably don't care if there are some that
the quality of life would deteriorate if someone put a mudroom on the front of their home.
You'd be surprised. Just gotta sit in my office and listen to the complaints come in sometimes.
Hey, Mike, I'm sorry. It's just unclear from what's written here. What are the proposed reductions on both the front and the side? 10 on the side and what in the front?
There was a proposal to reduce the front. It was 20 feet. They didn't really give us a number in the planning office. They just said, they wanted to put some addition, and it didn't meet the zoning, and there was a lot of nonconformities in their neighborhood, and I said I would look at the zoning for Res 9 to determine whether or not maybe those rules just weren't consistent or accurate. We kind of took a lot of what Brandy did with a lot of trust that she went through and did it, and for the most part I think she did a fantastic job. A lot of her stuff, when she said, hey, this is 90% of the property setbacks for Res 3 and 1500, and most of those were spot on. Res 9 had a little bit of mix, as I pointed out. You get to a Derby Drive where things are a little, still Res 9, but the parcels are, the houses are a little bit different. And so there was a request There was, I think, one up near Crestview or something like that that had a request about that, that I would go through and take a look. So I did. I took a look, and my thought was, I think we're okay with the front setback, and the side setbacks of 15 feet. Remember, a 15-foot setback means you're 15 feet from the side and they're 15 feet from the side. So every house is about 30 feet from the next house. That starts to really start to push things apart, and maybe push them apart unnecessarily.
And the front yard setback is from the edge of the right of way, so not the edge of the street.
Correct. So.
So did we get an answer for Aaron there? Like, is there a number set, or are we supposed to be?
I wouldn't change the front. They didn't give me a number. I wouldn't give a number. I think I would leave the front alone. If you want me to give a number, I could, change the 20 feet to 15 feet if you want, and change the 15-foot side to a 10-foot side. I don't think it would hurt to move to be closer on the side.
Okay. So 15 to 10 on the side is what Mike's suggesting. How do people feel? And do you want to do the front as well?
I think stay simpler, just do the side. I think Mike is reasonable on it. I'd say take that to the public.
Anyone else have a thought?
I agree with Marcella.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay.
All right, so we'll jump on to number 5 and see if we can get through this last one. So it's a little bit confusing, and I will try, if the picture you have in front of you on the screen, you'll see the red line is Route 2. Just to orient you, you'll see in little letters a little Gallison Hill coming out, and there's this big empty line that's kind of floating through there, just above Gallison Hill, and it kind of hooks up there. That is the now abandoned rail line, and that is the issue at hand. So the folks that are in the industrial park there, which you see, Cabot Creamery and all those, you see those buildings are right on the rail line, or the boundary, the property line of the rail boundary. But there is a 20-foot setback from the front and 20 feet from the side. So they would have to, any new buildings would have to be 20 feet from that rail line. And the people who own that property asked to make that 0. So, so you can see the image. You can see there's a lot of parcels in here on the abandoned rail line. There's nothing that goes on there. So I think I put a number of options in my memo. And I think the one that I would probably suggest was number 4, which was to add a rail setback. Would probably be the cleanest, and I would suggest 5 feet. That would allow room for maintenance on the building without having to go on the rail property, unless if they want to go out and do the homework and get permission from the railroad, then we could make it 0. I'd be happy making it 0. It's going to be vacant land indefinitely into the future, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to whatever. But I don't think I can justify allowing somebody to build a 0 lot line building and automatically assume that the rail division is going to give them permission to maintain their building into the future. So I think we have to at least have a 5-foot setback.
Anyone have any thoughts
Mike,
about number 4? Go ahead, Aaron.
Mike, do you have examples of other places where there's a 5-foot setback against rail property?
No, so this was only going to apply in the Eastern Gateway Farm and Forest District, up in that picture. So that picture was included most of those properties. You can see a lot of them are already on, there's a lot of buildings already on the rail line. So that was kind of the thought. And there are a couple other abandoned rail lines that you don't even know are abandoned rail lines until you look at the map. There's an abandoned rail line between Casella, I believe, and Agway. So you don't even see it there, but there's another one there that they would have to be 20 feet away from in order to do any development. So it kind of makes sense where these little abandoned rail lines squiggle their way through, that we would, kind of allow some development that's a little bit closer to that property line, considering they're probably not going to give up that property.
What do people think about possibly following Mike's number 4 suggestion of adding a 5-foot rail setback?
I think that makes sense. I mean, 5 feet seems like not quite enough room to do any maintenance, but maybe it is.
They could paint the building at least.
Yeah.
The
It's
5
probably
feet
enough.
seems the minimum, certainly.
I mean, they will be at the next meeting. I'm sure they'll make their case one way or the other. I'll be inviting them, Alicia, to the meeting, so I'm sure she will speak up vociferously in defense of her, the property owner's interests. So, I think at least the 5 feet gives me an ability to draft something. So again, a part of another thing that has to happen between now and when I warn it is I have to take any of these answers that I get, and I actually have to do the strikeout copy of the zoning. So that was why some of these I have to give you a memo to start with, because I don't know what I'm writing until I hear from you guys. If you guys say make it 5 feet, I can make it 5 feet, and we can change it afterwards once we hear testimony from the applicant.
Okay, let's just do that for now. It doesn't sound like there's a strong
Yeah, I agree. Five
so let's
feet
just
makes sense.
move along.
Yeah.
So number 6 is the PUDs.
Yes, so number 6 and number 7 are kind of related. Number 7 we've talked about many times, so we can skip it because you know what I'm asking. Number 6 is it's not in here. I emailed it late and I apologize because I didn't have it at home and I had to come into work to get it. But it was a PDF of the 2 PUD sections that we are recommending. So we've worked these out. There they are. So I'll just highlight what the 2 are. So the first one is a general planned unit development, and the second one is what we call a footprint type PUD. So general PUDs are what most communities have. And really what it says is if you want to cluster, you have 20 acres and 2 acre zoning. So you've got 10 possible units. I'm going to cluster all my development down to half-acre lots. I'm going to put them all down here and I'm going to conserve the rest. I don't want any density bonuses. I don't want anything special. I'm just clustering down the lots because it saves on infrastructure costs. It conserves open space. It has a lot of benefits. So that's what a general PUD is. I'm not going to go through line by line on these. We have a couple of questions that Meredith and I are still kind of working out from a technical standpoint, but that's what it is. It is a subdivision where you're clustering the lots into smaller pieces in order to make more efficient use of the land. So what we need to have are some rules on use. There are no special use requirements. Remember, when we had all of ours, and we do still have all of ours, they have all these other special uses. You get no bonus uses, no bonus densities, just allowed to make smaller lots, smaller setbacks, in order to fit all the structures in. There's some requirements that talk about how do you manage common land. If you have common land, there's always an unbuilt piece. So how is that unbuilt piece going to be managed? So there are basic questions like that that are in section 4301. 4302 is what is called a footprint type PUD or a condominium PUD. There's a lot of names you can put to it. What makes this one slightly different is you're talking about sharing a number of pieces. So what you will do is you may be in a condominium, Murray Hill. We're going to make townhouses. You own your townhouse. The land is subdivided. So the difference between one type of condo is a condo can go through and say, you don't own the building. You only own inside the walls. And you pay association dues. The building is owned by the association, but you own your unit, but only to the extent that you own that piece, but you don't, the land isn't subdivided. In this case, the land is subdivided, but you still share resources. So there's a common parking lot, there's a common, usually they're really small, their footprint, that's why they call them footprint. They just go just around the outside of the building. And they're pretty common. They're very common if you were in a place like Stowe or Smugs or Killington. It's very common. If you have a timeshare, you're going to probably own you'll be a condominium owner of that building, and it's a footprint. And so this just is another option you will see people use from time to time. And the big question between a condo and a footprint type PUD just comes down to the question of, are you subdividing the land or are you subdividing the building? If you're only subdividing the building and not subdividing the land, you don't need to do this. If you want to subdivide and own the land under your townhouse, then you need to go through this. And they're just two basic types. So this just goes through those special rules because there's a little bit more shared things. So we have to have a little bit more review of how these, usually your parking is shared and your recreation areas are shared because, you literally just own the building. So you have to provide for recreational opportunities and you have to provide for these other things. So that's a little bit of the difference between these two new ones that we would be creating. And I don't know if people want me to go into more detail than that. That they're certainly all written out here. If people want to review them over the next couple of weeks and come prepared with some questions, we'll get a final draft out. But again, no density bonuses for either one of these. And then number 7 is I'm going to charge the windmill again for number 7 and try to eliminate under the new neighborhood development the required new neighborhood development, and under the conservation subdivision the required conservation subdivision. Part of these are again going to come down to projects such as the one on the hill where these guys are looking, Habitat for Humanity doesn't want a density bonus, doesn't need a density bonus. They want to do a PUD. They're going to do a PUD, but because of the neighborhood they're in, they're going to be required to do a PUD. And that's going to mess them all up again. So it's just this repeated thing of stop forcing people into these PUDs. If we can strike the required PUDs, and just, if people want to do them, if you want a density bonus, if you want to get more than you're otherwise allowed, you have to jump through a lot of hoops and do more. And if you don't want those density bonuses, then you can use a general PUD or you can use a footprint PUD. And so once again, that's what number 7 is. We're back. We've had this discussion before, my arguments. So that's what number 7 is.
Did anyone have anything to say about 6 or 7?
The challenge for me is that I don't think it's the right incentive. I think we've talked about this before, and saying that density should be something you have to work for isn't, I don't want to make people work for density. I want more density. So that feels like the wrong incentive to me.
Yeah, it's pretty much been what I've tried to advocate, is that I've tried to set up the zoning continuously, keep improving it, to get people to, the easiest path is to do what we want them to do. And the hardest path is, so we set up the waivers. We don't want people building these oversized, buildings. So we set footprints such that, hey, if you meet our footprint requirement, great. If you want more than that, then you got to go to the DRB. And it kind of encourages people to meet that requirement. It makes it harder to not meet the requirement, as opposed to this, which actually makes it harder to do what you want them to do.
I think the challenge with it is that I don't think when this was passed, anyone realistically expected that the benefits provided by the density bonuses were like why this was being passed. I think it was like a type of compromise and trying to work with a lot of the neighbors and people who had showed up with concerns around the design of the neighborhoods. So I feel like that's some of the background behind it. It wasn't like, here's an incentive to do this. There's a lot of concerns about these properties being developed in a way that that people won't like, and the design of the new neighborhood and the rural UD sort of tried to address those specifically. So it was like, well, we would feel less bad about this if we were assured that X percentage would be dedicated to open space. Then it's like, well, okay, yeah, we can live with more housing units here if we know that this space will be kept open.
That helps. Thank you, John.
I think I agree with what Mike's saying in number 7 here. This seems like a classic problem that I've started to learn is part of planning sometimes, where it's just where you try to plan in the abstract and then you make requirements that in reality end up being bad ideas, but they happen because you plan in the abstract. Like giving the flexibility here in number 7 seems to me to be like a wiser course, where it's more optional, where we're not like saying ahead of time and out of context that it has to be a certain way. So that's my thoughts about number 7.
So if we're good with that, I can skip. We'll skip the next one really quick, because the number 9 talks about a lot of technical fixes, which I don't think we need to go through each one of them. I think they were relatively self-explanatory. A lot of these are ones that come up as a result of different projects. Somebody has an attached garage and we've got a question. So does the attached garage need to meet the primary structure setback, or can the attached garage meet the accessory structure setback because it's attached to the primary structure? So we've got these. Anyways, that's just one of them. Some little bit with signs. We had a couple of signs. We got a lot of sign issues. We got to fix our sign rules at some point, but there are a couple of little sign fixes that are in there to help clarify them. There's a question about front yard fences. So again, these are all interpretations. Somebody wants to put up a front yard fence. It's in front of the house, but it's on the side yard. Is that a front yard fence, or is that a side yard fence? This clarifies as to what rules apply. There's just a little bit of some landscaping applicability rules. Somebody goes through and replaces a lamp in the parking lot, and next thing you know, they have to go and replace all the landscaping because they got non-conforming landscaping. It's just a little thing to go through and say, hey, if you're doing something that's not affecting the ground, you don't have to do that. So that's what a number of these are. Again, you're more than welcome to go through and review them and email me with questions. Number 10, we had adopted interim river hazard rules and never made them permanent. So we are actually they've expired, but we need to go back and make them permanent. And then there was just a reference in there to accessory structures. We have a section that says you can't build structures unless it's allowed elsewhere. Well, the only place it's allowed elsewhere is in one place under accessory structures. So we might as well reference it because it doesn't come up very often and the zoning administrator kept missing it. So we wanted to just put a reference in there. And then I guess we can back up to 8, which is kind of Kirby's thing, which was the removal of residential densities from riverfront and residential 1500 districts. So the idea is kind of, I think Kirby introduced it a little bit already, to let bulk and massing of structures limit the number of units that can be built rather than an arbitrary requirement. I think we've had this conversation before. I don't think this is new. You know, the two of us talked about it a little bit, and you know, my suggestion to him was that you know, it's already that way for urban center 2 or 1, 2, and 3. So if we wanted to extend it, I think it's going to be a controversial topic, but if we started with the next layer out, which would be riverfront and residential 1500, that could make sense as this to get the public used to the idea of we're just going to regulate bulk and massing in the riverfront district and in the 1500 district, and not have a set density, which is 1 unit per 1500, which is 27 units an acre. So
I don't know if it would be helpful, but I pulled out some slides from a presentation I gave a bunch of years ago. And it used Montpelier as an example and focused on our last zoning changes. But I have in it, there's photos of like a whole bunch of different homes and what the densities are. And the point of it is to show sort of how meaningless density is, or how people don't think it is what it think. Like, anyways, I don't know if like maybe framing things, or if there's any utility in trying to use this and queuing up the discussion to kind of hit the idea home that it's around design and not density.
yeah, I think you'd have to unshare your screen, Kirby, if he was going to pull that up.
Yeah, do people want that? I mean, it's except everyone else if they.
How long is it, John? How long is it? A long PowerPoint?
I think
No,
I'm just going to show a few pictures.
Yeah, it's as long as you want it to be.
I don't feel like I need convincing specifically, although I'm sure it's very interesting and I'd love to see it. My question is around which neighborhoods are Res 1500? Can you remind me? I have the zoning map up, but
Yeah, I could try to pull it up and
I think that would be helpful, so we know what neighborhoods we're talking about.
Does this include, if we're taking out density, then does that include the floor area ratio as well? Or is this strictly residential density?
I believe it was only going to be the residential density.
So FAR would still be there?
FAR would remain. But again, it's really up to the proposal. It could go either way.
I mean, I was thinking residential density, but I'm of course completely open to how people want to adjust this. Just I think Mike covered everything that I would say. It's just the two main points are use this as an opportunity to talk about how dimensional limitations achieve our goals. Density does not do a good job of that, and can lead to us going against our own goals. Start that conversation. The second thing is this particular proposal is very incremental. These are already relatively high density places, and we're just going to go ahead and just remove the caps on there because they're arbitrary. And then after a period of time, a year or two, we'll see how, you know, this doesn't lead to any like negative. Like, and that's the idea, is just getting people like around the understanding that that nothing bad is going to happen here. This is good stuff. So the neighborhoods, can everyone see the map?
Yeah, so it's the number 8s that you see there. I don't know if there's a 4th one, but you can see 3 of them there. And 8-1 down here by Monsignor Crosby. And 8-3 that is over Loomis St. Paul. I'd have to have.
So it's the light green.
No, 8-2 is up actually Franklin Square, and 8-3 is the
yeah,
Paul Loomis.
And then the orange is the riverfront, the dark orange.
Yeah, the dark orange is the riverfront. And I think we'll have to have more of a conversation about that one because the one elephant in the room on riverfront is that the lower portion of Sabin's pasture is riverfront. So just making everybody aware that that proposal would, have a potential, and again, I'm not necessarily for it or against it. I think in concept, I like it. As I look at it with my political hat on, I see danger signs. So
yeah, and that's my hope. And maybe I'm super optimistic here, but my hope is that maybe we can change the political attitudes to make people it's like a teaching moment.
I think that's great. I think just worthwhile, just even again, I think trying to reframe the conversation. Even if we do get a lot of negative feedback, I think it's worthwhile. And John, I wasn't clear on what exactly you were saying you had pictures of, but maybe that could be helpful in sharing in the public hearing. But I was a little confused about what you were saying.
Yeah, so the idea was to try to bring it to life and demystify what we're talking about. So I've got photos, of homes around Montpelier and what their density is. And it's set up in a way where you can you're supposed to guess how many. I can share my screen and show you if you want.
Go for it. We do in a few minutes here.
Yeah, the whole idea of it is getting to the origins of density in Vermont and how it came originally from public health and how we were industrializing, coming to our downtowns and village centers, but sort of then shifted to eugenics and keeping people different than us out of our neighborhoods. Skip through these things. This is, again, I don't think want to go through all of these parts of it, but this is just showing our revenue per acre and across Montpelier, and the whole idea of how we've before and after zoning, we've built our community that's far less valuable or generating in terms of revenue, and we've made it illegal to build sort of the most valuable parts of our country. And this again was before our last zoning changes. So here's my house, which is 17 and a half units an acre. Our neighbors, sorry Charlie for showing your house while you were putting primer all over the front of it, but 33 units an acre. Just this was literally just all a walk I did 5 minutes outside of my house. So this is a duplex at 10 units an acre. These are at 7 and 2 units an acre. These are 40 units an acre. These are 12.5 and 18.5. This is 42 units an acre.
And I think if you stop there, I think that was the good example for that one. Kind of goes to the point of what I think Kirby's proposal was, which is that that's a building of a fixed size, and yet it could have 15 units that are 4-bedroom units. It could have up to 80 studios, but they're all fitting in the same box. So why do we ascribe density when we could regulate the bulk and massing and say, let the free market decide how many units? In the past, most units were family units. So you had, if you were to look at our demographics, you'd see the number of people that were living alone was relatively low. You were generally living with somebody else. Today, 30%, that's the largest group, is people living alone. And yet there are, if you were to look at a map of all of our available units, you'd see very few one bedroom and studios. Most of them are going to be 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, or they're houses with multiple bedrooms. So the idea is, if the market says we've got a lot of people who are single, I can put 80 studios in this, but the density, the zoning would only allow 40 or 20, because we're counting dwelling units as opposed to just looking at the bulk and massing. And that's a little bit of what the conversation is. By removing the density and just regulating to bulk and massing, then we can say however many you can fit. This is probably a non-conforming building on that street, but it still gives an idea of that's what we're talking about. Is you don't know how many units are in that building. All you really care about is how big the building is and what does it look like.
Right, and you couldn't build this now anyway.
Right. And so this is like, if you're scared of some big new thing, well, like, still not going to happen if you change density, even though maybe it wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah, this is 1.3 units. This is 36 units. Like, what's the difference between this and this? 36 units an acre. Anyways, these are some examples of maybe how density isn't a very good indicator of what the character of a neighborhood is.
But because we've redefined density, we're not using it a units per acre. We are redefining it as square feet per dwelling unit. So we kind of flipped it on the edge there, that, it might be helpful to go through those same examples, John, and say, okay, this is in a district right now that's 1,500 or 3,000. So, to make it more in keeping with what our zoning is right now.
Yeah, that would make sense. So like this is like 2,000, or so it's apples to apples if we're talking about, so they're not confused as we're like, well, you're talking about 20 units an acre, but then you're talking about our 600 or whatever. So I don't know if it's useful or not. This together a while back, and it could do more harm than good. I don't know.
I think it illustrates the point, and some people are visual like that. So for some people, I think it would help it hit home.
Wait, could you just modify this to make it more of a comparison to our existing zoning?
Like just change the units?
Like yeah. Just say, okay, this is in this district, and or the multifamily one is in is in, res 6,000 or something. Anyway,
Yeah.
just to kind of make it as you said, apples to apples, so people have a really clear idea of this is what we have right now, and is that what we really need?
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Mhm.
Does anyone else have anything to say about this item? Is this something people are interested in proceeding with and talking about at the hearing and possibly passing on to city council?
So 2 questions from my perspective. One is, everybody's comfortable with the Riverfront proposal? And then the second one is, are we also eliminating FAR, which I think had been mentioned earlier? Because FAR is usually, so that's floor area ratio, so that's looking at the percentage of the lot that can be used for non-residential, generally non-residential. It also applies to congregate living, because congregate living doesn't have dwelling units to count. So congregate living is measured in FAR. Do we stick to the same prescription for commercial as well, just to go and regulate bulk and massing in the Riverfront district?
I mean, I'm concerned about housing, but so I didn't care much about FAR before, but now that you're talking about congregate living, maybe that is a reason. What other people think?
I guess I would recommend that you keep your argument as simple as possible. So maybe in keeping the FAR, at least at this point, and just going forth with one part of it. Because you're going to have enough to argue about with that already.
Okay, just one clarification, so.
Do other people have thoughts?
I can definitely see Barb's point. I think it's confusing for people if we're already going to make a big change. So starting with, I think leaving that out for now makes sense.
Okay.
But I could
Right.
probably be convinced the other way if I knew a little bit more about it. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I could go either way too, but the whole thing's meant to be incremental, and so I'm fine with leaving it at the residential. Okay, well, that went smoothly. Let's hope that the hearing goes smoothly as well. Mike, do you need us to vote on anything, or just we're just save it for the hearing, right?
No, I think unless there was something that was contentious that we felt we did not want to put forth, then I might say, let's have a vote, because it seemed to be a split decision on a point. But again, this doesn't commit anybody to supporting anything once it gets to public hearing. This is just, what are we going to put on the public hearing? So I've got to go and now take what we had in the memo, finish the strikeout copy, get that all set to go, get that back out to you guys, draft up a whole stack of public hearing notices to get out to everybody that is potentially impacted. I probably won't send it to everybody in Res 9 when we're changing just the side setback a little bit. But everybody that is in Harrison Ave, who is surrounding or in the map change for Heaton, and everybody who is in and around the map change for Northfield Street.
Okay. And I think the only point of clarification that I'm remembering is it seemed like more people were in favor of, with numbers 1 and 2, putting those with the neighborhood 9-3 as the starting point or the baseline. Yes. For the hearing.
Yep, that's my note.
Okay. Anyone have anything else before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, we have a motion from Barb. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Stephanie. Those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Everybody have a good night, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for the memo, Mike. It's helpful.